Hello and welcome to the early spring edition of our teacher webinar. I'm Ellen Egley, the Director of STEM Jobs, and I'll be walking you through the issue, things that I would point out to students if I was using it in my classroom, as well as the lesson plans that come along with your toolkit. So we'll go ahead and dive right in. In this issue for the STEM Myths Busted section, we looked at the myth that STEM careers are only for analytical people and not people who are creative. And I don't know if some of this myth spawns from the fact that we use STEM and not STEAM, and sometimes we do get some pushback about that. But we believe that whatever acronym you use, we're all on the same side. We all believe that STEM subjects, including the arts, because we do consider that to be a STEM subject, requires creativity, requires communication, problem solving, collaboration, those things that are developed in the arts and in your typical STEM classes. So while analytical people are usually very successful in STEM careers, so are creative people because you can never solve a problem by doing things the way they've always been done. So we take a deeper look at that myth at the beginning of the issue. Then we continue our ABCs of STEM, and in this issue we look at letters I, J, K, and L. And for the I, we looked at the intelligence industry. And this one was actually a little bit tricky because as we were reaching out to intelligence agencies, we had some issues with people not being able to be interviewed for confidentiality reasons, or they had top secret clearance, or they were undercover officers and could not have their picture or name displayed. So finally, we worked it out with the FBI that we got to interview 4 people who work at the FBI. The only caveat was that we could not include their names or their pictures. So we were given a gender and a job title, and we assigned fictitious names to each of them just to make the story a little bit easier to read rather than using a placeholder. So you get to read about 4 people who have very different jobs within the FBI. And I think this is really important for students because when they think of intelligence careers, I think they only think about, weapon carrying agents out in the field in all the TV shows that they've watched. Meanwhile, the FBI is a company just like any other. So they have IT specialists, they have HR, they have marketing, and they have some really important careers as well that happen behind the scenes that those popular TV shows don't really showcase well. So we have 4 different interviews in the intelligence section, and then we close out with the job spread that showcases 10 careers in intelligence that your students probably never even knew existed because we did not before creating that job spread. Then for J, we took a look at jewelry, and we had the opportunity to interview 3 amazing women from the Gemological Institute of America, or GIA, and their jobs range from studying gems in a lab to kind of processing the physical properties and chemical properties of different gems, trying to find out their history, whether they were lab grown or natural grown, and doing some really incredible research around those gems and what makes them different from others, as well as finding the backstory for people who own those gems. So those women tell their stories, and some of them did not start out wanting to go into jewelry specifically, so those are some really unique stories to share with your students. Then in the lesson plan that goes with those articles, we have students read one of the articles, and then they actually get to choose a famous gemstone, diamond or otherwise, to research on their own, and then tell the story of that gem. So they get to research its chemical properties, how it was grown, its size, the 4 C's, and then tell the story of that gem. And then in the elaborate section of the lesson plan, they actually get to design a setting for the famous gem that they would display in a piece of jewelry. So as we talked about in the STEM myth at the beginning, creativity is an essential part of STEM careers, and we give students a chance whenever possible to flex those creative muscles and create something really cool. Next, for the letter K, we looked at kinetics. So kinetics can be a lot of things, and it was a field I wasn't very familiar with before we started researching this for the magazine, but it involves a lot of sports science, a lot of physical therapy, preventive measures to prevent students and athletes from being injured during sports, and is actually really essential to keep people healthy and moving. So we start out by interviewing a gentleman named Zane who works for a sports clinic, and as part of his clinical work, he partners with a local high school and provides athletic training services for their teams. So students get to read about Zane, and then after Zane is a wonderful story about a female athletic trainer who actually works for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And her story is so wonderful because she is actually only the second ever female to work in the NFL as an athletic trainer. So we share Sonia's story, and I think it's really inspiring for students for several reasons. First, for your female students to get to see a woman who's very successful in her professional life, working with a professional sports team that just happens to have male athletes, and she's doing some incredible things with them. And secondly, for your students who are interested in sports, for them to get to see that there are real STEM careers in sports, and that even though they might not get to be a professional athlete and make it at that level, doesn't mean that their sports careers are over when they graduate from high school or college, but they can continue to work in the field that they're so passionate about. So whenever you look at the lesson plan that goes along with kinetics, they read the article about Zane, and then students work in groups, and you can either assign them a sport or they can choose one, and they research the most common injuries that happen in that sport, and then they actually get to design a prototype of a device that would help prevent or treat those injuries, and they get to share their designs with the class. So again, creativity is such a key part of everything that real STEM professionals do, so we try to give students a chance to explore that as well. And then for the L in this issue, we took a look at the law, and this is a field that a lot of people don't think of as being intrinsically STEM, but lawyers, paralegals all need to be able to do some really intense research to be able to do their jobs well and represent their clients. So you certainly learn research when you're doing research projects in English class, but to know how to dissect information, how to analyze data, that all comes from your STEM classes. So we got to interview one woman who was a law professor. We got to interview a woman named Sarah Hancher, who is an attorney in a small civil law firm and does some pro bono work. And then we close out the issue by interviewing a woman who currently serves as a law assistant, but is taking her bar exam and with the hopes of becoming an attorney. And her story is really interesting because she talks about how she was actually inspired by Claire Huxtable in The Cosby Show as a little kid and thought, well, if she can do that, so can I. And that's really what we try to convey with the magazine as well, is showing students real people who are being successful in STEM careers so that they can see themselves in those careers and feel empowered to strive to be successful in those careers as well. And then for the law lesson plan, we have students debate a topic of your choice so that it is relevant to the content being covered in your classroom. We gave you some ideas, you're welcome to use your own, and we actually structure a collegiate debate around that topic where students have to present an opening statement, a closing statement, and then they also have to talk about how their personal views have changed as a result of hearing other people's opinions. So that's a really fun, unique lesson plan where we don't always get to discuss things in a structured way in our classrooms. Sometimes I know when I was teaching, class discussions can be a little bit of a free-for-all because you're trying to get kids excited and engaged and get everyone involved. But I think structuring a debate in this way can be really unique for students because they're forced to hear each other and reflect upon what other people are saying, especially when they don't agree with them, which is obviously a really healthy discourse at this moment in our society. And then the final lesson plan in your toolkit is our Exploring Careers lesson plan, where students look at one of the job spreads, pick one of the jobs to explore in greater depth, and then present their findings to the class. And we always do this careers lesson plan with every issue, so if it's not in your toolkit, it is able to be found digitally. And I forgot to mention the intelligence lesson plans are available on the website as well. And new digital lesson plans are always being added to the website. So check back often and see if there's a 5E lesson plan there that can help you reach your students in some new and exciting ways. So that's it for the early spring webinar. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, you can email us directly at info@stemjobs.com, info@stemjobs.com. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.